is responsible for the changes we're witnessing right now? Is it man-made?
Yes, primarily. We have some natural causes. Volcanic eruptions put out chemicals into the air. But by and large, some of the things we're doing that fuel industrialization are contributing to climate change. Specifically, and let me take Nigeria for example, we're flaring gas in Nigeria. That is a major contributor to climate change. We have over 20 million vehicles burning fossil fuels on any given day on Nigerian roads. In most climes in the US, where I've lived for 25 years, we have emissions reduction standards. If you want to register your car, you must go for emissions test. And if your car exceeds the emission level, it cannot drive. They will put denied sign. If you drive that vehicle as a criminal offense, you will be arrested. And every year you must go through that. So most countries have emissions reduction standards. We don't have that here. You look at the issue of our light bulbs. We are still using incandescent light bulbs, about 200 million light bulbs. Those bulbs put out over 1,000 pounds of carbon dioxide every year, each one of them. So that is a major source of pollution. Then you have our industries. We are not really using emission reduction factories. Cement production is still very polluting. So all this, and then of course, bush burning. So we have all these practices in Nigeria and Africa that are contributing to climate change. Principally, the burning of fossil fuels, petrol, diesel, all those things contribute to the greenhouse gas.
All right, before we let you go, before we talk to the general Director General of the National Emergency Management Agency and that's of hydrological, let's remain with you for a while. And this is the reason. We had the Montreal Protocol, which was a success in terms of agreeing on what steps to be taken by the entire world. We also had that of 2015 that held in France, which many countries agreed with, apart from, of course, US, which declined lately. Now, the question is, the deployment of technology has been hailed as an alternative towards finding a solution for mitigation and, of course, having a correct prediction for people to get prepared for any natural disaster coming as a result of climate change. Now, and in Africa, as Victor pointed out via Skype, that we don't have access to that kind of technology. So what should be our faith in terms of mitigation now? Because invariably, from what you have explained too, we are contributing also immensely to climate change.
I think technology plays a role, but I think we're at that stage in Nigeria's development where we have a pretty good sense of what is about to come. NIMET has been up to its duties, by and large, in warning us that we're going to have rainfall. Hydrological Agency has also been doing its own part. So I think when it comes to warning that we're going to have flooding, maybe we were caught unawares in 2012 when this thing happened. But since then, I think there's a general understanding that flooding is here with us, and in most cases it's going to be catastrophic. It's going to exceed our normal expectation of flooding. So the next level of mediation, mediation and remediation and mitigation is how do we prepare in advance? I want us to devote more resources to preparation because, as I was pointing out, there are 3 reasons why flooding is going to become a recurrent decimal here. I pointed out the first one, because we have more water in all our oceans and rivers. They're all interlinked. The next one is that because of the extreme heat they were experiencing, as Dr. Fodeke pointed out, you now have excess moisture in the atmosphere. When you have excess moisture, eventually it comes back down as rain, in some cases as snow, in some cases as hurricane. Okay. So then the final factor we have, which is why you're seeing a lot of flooding in the northern area, which in northern Nigeria, which is actually abnormal for us, the ground has become aridified. The ground has become so hard, almost like concrete. So when you have water, it doesn't absorb naturally the way it should. The ground has lost its ability to absorb water. So that leads to flash flooding. So within 5 minutes, you can go from dry ground to flood.
Thank you very much, John Osonwa. Let's bring in quickly the Director General of the National Emergency Management Agency Assessment Tour. Could you give us an update of the situation as regards flooding right now in the country?
Well, the situation is really worrisome. It is devastating, particularly my experience or what I saw in Lokoja yesterday. So I had a report. We sent a team earlier on last week. They came up with another report. We felt all stakeholders must go and really reconfirm the situation. This is a situation where the whole community will be submerged. You can, in a sub-community of thousands of people, you could only see one roof. All others, you can't just see anything. Even within Lokoja, greater part of all the buildings by the river banks were completely submerged. You can't imagine how someone could even build. In fact, you need not to be told that that place will one day be submerged. But in any case, it has happened. So then we quickly create a meeting, avenue for us to discuss the situation, and then quickly decided, based on the delegation of authority approved by the president, we now declare national emergency in Kogi and 3 other states, as I mentioned. So it's really devastating.
Now, give us an idea of why the 4 states have been declared of a national emergency. Is it so critical? And if so, what is happening there now? Is there any kind of rescue mission? Are people being displaced or something?
Well, the first, or rather the 6th committee set up on the 7th of September went round. First, to inform the state government of how dangerous it is because of the information we at our hands at that time. And the situation keep on growing, particularly the levels at the confluence of River Niger and Benue in Lokoja keep on rising. In fact, in each of the days up to today is more than what it was the same day, 2012. So the assessment was to identify where, locations of higher ground, to also identify equipments, facilities that could be used for such a rescue, and to visit the communities that were considered really, highly threatened by the flood, and then possibly evacuate them. We carried out some evacuation from that time to date. In fact, yesterday, the naval unit in Lokoja carried out a rescue mission, but the people refused to move. Even though the community was partly submerged, they refused to move. These are some of the social issues we are faced with in the course of evacuation and rescuing people. But
so how do you deal with that?
Yes, some minimal or micro force may have to deploy it in such circumstances, because it's the responsibility of government to protect life and properties. Where, in fact, it's criminal for you to put yourself in a position where you could lose your life. So these are some of the decisions, very hard decisions we must take in saving lives and properties, together with the security agencies.
Now, some people refuse to be evacuated from their original abode. Now, in this arrangement, is there any place prepared for those who are being evacuated? Because perhaps some people might be thinking of what happened to evacuees, in 2012. Some have not recovered from the shock of what they saw in the IDPs there.
Just like I mentioned earlier on, identifications of places of higher ground, hostels, facilities, Presidential Committee on Flood Relief and Rehabilitation has constructed many hostels in fact, there are two in Kogi State, and now they are being occupied by some of the evacuated people. So some other locations, many of them, some places 11, some 10 locations that can accommodate thousands or hundreds of people have been identified and are being occupied where we found them, where we found some people that we really are really displaced.
Now, in the course of my research work, I found that now taking you back to 2012, some people, especially in Lokoja, why they do not want to move is because they said when they moved the last time, there was no arrangement made for them to move back to a new place. So it's like moving back to your ancestral home. And then we're in a new year again, and we're having this same challenge. So the thought of a permanent relocation base is what bothers some of them. What do you think?
Well, first of all, I just mentioned that Dangote Committee has provided some hostels and movement has been made. It is true there are some gaps, but since I came into office with the tremendous support I get from the, Mr. President, we are developing a project whereby some basic housing facilities will be provided. However, I want to make it very, very clear, a submission will soon be made to Mr. President, whereby the state governors will be made, will be required condition presidents to intervention to provide counterpart funding in an agreement to be signed between federal government and the state government. Because the state government is mainly the state government responsibility to ensure that all rules and regulations are adhered to. The federal government cannot go and work for the Urban Development Board in any of the states. But however, a few weeks ago, we made a submission to the National Economic Council meeting under the chairmanship of the Vice President and recommend that we should catalyze the process, make the state governments to work. The federal government offered to give 30%, and then in the process of convincing Dangote group to give 40%, while the state government give 30%.
Are they complying?
Well, it's a process. They agreed. It was an agreement reached, and I believe they will comply.
All right. Thank you very much indeed. Agreements reached. See, why Joy raised that issue of 2012 is because of experience. People have acquired experience, over time, and can easily predict what is going to happen to them if they move from their original place of abode. At this point, before we come to the Hydrological Service Agency, DG, let's go to Kaduna and, of course, speak with Dr. Yusuf Abdullahi Rigasa. He is the General Manager at Kaduna State Environmental Protection Authority. Now, let's share the experience in Kaduna with respect to flooding. What has happened in the area? And if people are affected in Kaduna, how is the state government reacting to that?
Yes, first I would like to start by commending the federal agencies that are involved in flood emergency response, especially NIMET. They've made their projections timely, and NIHSA has also equally released the flood outlook for this year very timely. So from these two agencies, we've been able to capture their projections in terms of rainfall and flood, which we've been able to gather and disseminate to our communities. So I think the response this year has been better than in 2012, in 2015, and possibly will be better when in, say, 2021, because this seems to be a 3-year cycle. And what they have done so far is highly commendable. We in Kaduna, after getting information from them, we have a small publication that we call Card of Flood. If you go to our website, you will see it, but it's a small booklet that we disseminate to all MDAs involved in flash flood emergency response. We have about 10 agencies right now working under a certain platform to respond to flash flood across the state. And within Kaduna Metropolis, in August, about 59 places experience flash floods. And we have sent out flood alert in August, We have equally sent another one in September. So we have identified about 8 possible public spaces where IDPs can be temporarily accommodated. And we have identified, as I mentioned earlier, over 10 MDAs coming together. What we are working for now is to conduct a drill where all these agencies can come together and test their capacities, in case of flood emergencies. And for the communities that have already experienced flash flood events, most of them have received relief materials from NEMA, from the State Emergency Agency, which is SEMA. But right now, what we are trying to do for communities that are vulnerable is we're trying to recover our buffer zones, because some of these buffer zones along our streams and rivers have been allocated and they have been built, they've been developed by citizens. So we are trying to recover some of these buffer zones by issuing, say, relocation notice, relocation order, so that, and in the long run, the government is prepared to develop a certain layout for some of these people that are going to be relocated, so that we solve the problem like permanently, because it is a recurrent event every 3 years that floodplains are being flooded. We cannot be, we cannot be offering emergency services that can be avoided every 3 years. Where we can avoid it is better for our people to adjust. But we will continue to enhance our capacity to respond to some of these events so that we service our communities better.
Very much, Dr. Rigasa. We will get back to you shortly. Let me go quickly to the Director General of the Nigerian Hydrological Services Agency, Ahmed Mabudi Basha. Listening to Dr. Rigasa, he touched on some key issues, which is advocacy, preparation, and synergy. These are important and essential at this moment, considering the complex nature of flooding across Nigeria. And I want to believe that most of the agencies involved are doing that, because I hear you were also in Lokoja with the director. Tell us about your experience so far with this issue and how you're collaborating with relevant agencies to solve the issue.
Yeah, I look at this as an issue of shared responsibilities and synergy. Apart from our mandate of monitoring all the major rivers in Nigeria, including the transboundary of River Benue and Niger, the agency gives some periodic a warning alert on flooding, especially during the rainy season. And we have done that, especially July, August, September, which is referred as the Jas months, is the period where rains fall heavily across the nation. So we will continue to experience rain as down to September 29th as earmarked by the Nigerian Meteorological Services Agency. That is for the northern side of Nigeria, precisely Sokoto and Katsina. And December is earmarked for the recession of the southern part along the coast. So the implication here is, for the next 10 days, according to the analysis of the Nigerian Meteorological Services, will continue to experience rain. So while I now talk about the issue of synergy and understanding for collaboration between the relevant agencies, as we did with NEMA, as you rightly mentioned, we were in Lokoja yesterday, and what we saw was really devastating. Nigerian Hydrological Services Agency, after the issue of the flood outlook, we go around the country to sensitize the nation, especially where we earmark in there is low risk and high risk. So in most cases, where we go for our sensitization is the high risk areas. And we have gone around to sensitize the people. But what will surprise you is like what my brother there rightly mentioned, that we don't take the issue of flood serious. And we don't also take the issue of sensitization as serious as it should be. Because by the time you are there for sensitization, you only see a few people around. I want to commend the Kaduna State government. When we went for the sensitization 2 months ago, I seen all the local chiefs, all the ward heads were there. And they took this thing because the issue of that sensitization is to, avoid what happened in 2012, get prepared, no matter, even if it is coming, now it has to now come in a minimal way. So those are the kinds of things we do and to make sure that lives are not lost, even if there should be in a minimal way.
Now, sorry, let me just do a quick follow-up on that about sensitization. You know, that tells me that what you did can be likened to word of mouth sensitization. Are you thinking about jingles in different dialects, different languages, to see how you can get to those at the grassroots?
No, it's beyond the mouth, because we have the jingles. In fact, after every state that we went, after the sensitization, we go around to distribute these jingles. In fact, they were done with the local languages, both Hausa, Igbo, Yoruba, and including those local languages for you to understand what it means by the effect of this flooding. So it beyond the mouth. And we also go on air, radios and television, to tell the general public that this is the level of how it is going to happen this year in 2018. And already we have now started working against what is the AFO will be in 2019.
Now, we had a prediction, and it's an annual prediction from NIMET and, of course, the hydrological services like yours. But now, does it just end in prediction? You have moved around. You are from Lokoja yesterday, and I'm sure you have gone to other parts of the country. Now, is there any impact of your sensitization with respect to what happened in 2012? Did you see any mitigation, activities going on in some states, like sandbags, and what have you, expecting, of course, that the rain is going to come? Is there anything like that? And are there other logistic issues you could raise on this?
You know, after the prediction, Nigerian Meteorological Services do their rainfall. When they told us when the rain will start, we also now predict where there is serious flooding, low and high, which will now tell the nation. Now, we now collaborate. We now give all other relevant agencies the information of the water levels, especially NIMET, NEMA, and all this, so that you can prepare for it. Some of the issues there is, you now tell them, don't build your house on the flood area, flood area, or culverts. All these issues are there. So beyond just saying the prediction, we also advise the general public on what to do to avoid these catastrophic issues.
All right, let's go to John Osonwa. I want you to tell us a bit about advocacy. Considering what happened in 2012, have we done well in terms of sensitization, advocacy, and how well are the states, talking about the sub-nationals now, supporting the federal government in this drive?
I think, as some of the other guests have pointed out, they are trying to sensitize the public. But I would also advise that we dummy it down. And we have what we call the dummy series. Doesn't mean that people are dummies, but it just tells you the level of reduction in terms of language, in terms of approach that you need to adopt. And what do I mean by that? If we want to reach the vast majority of Nigerians, we need to use the mechanisms that they are used to. Some local areas still use the town crier system. Some local areas have religious institutions where they share information, traditional institutions, age groups, women groups, market groups, traders, Okada groups. So we need to really break this down. The other thing I would like to, and that is a very potent way of reaching the masses. Instead of just having town hall meetings, a lot of people have become jaded and very, very uneasy about all these town hall meetings. In most cases, nothing concrete really comes out. So we need to reach people at the source of their existence. We need to really break it down. The other thing I want to suggest, which is what we do in the U.S., a lot of the television and radio stations are keyed into the National Emergency Broadcast System. If something like this is about to happen, they will break the programming like this one. As you're doing this program, you will hear a beep sounding. Say, this is an emergency broadcast. And everybody pays attention because it doesn't happen often. So in their language, you will now tell them what the problem is, what they should do. So those are the things we can do. But I want to go beyond sensitization, because there's a key area that we haven't really touched on, and that is the government preparation in terms of infrastructure to prevent flooding. We are lacking in that area. And what do I mean by that? The issue of dams. Let's look at the issue of dams, because when you see this massive flooding happening, killing hundreds of people, it's usually linked to dam management or dam deficiency. You look at what happened in 2012. Lagdo Dam in Cameroon released water into Nigeria. Of course, they had to do that because if you leave the water level, I think theirs only takes about 21 meters. A little bit beyond that, they need to release the water. So if you allow it to go beyond that, the dam can burst, the dam can break. So they have to release their water. It is their responsibility. But the problem we have is Nigeria was supposed to build a counterpart dam to contain some of that excess water. That's an Hausa Dam in Adamawa. And for the past 35 years, it hasn't been built. That is a major contributor to flooding in that whole axis of Nigeria. Then you look at the dams that we already have in Nigeria. We have about 900 dams. Some of them are very small, about 200 big ones. Over 90% of those dams are not functioning properly. Even those ones that are functioning properly, desilting, which is where you dredge all the excess sand, is not happening the way it should. Most of those dams are not functioning beyond 60%. So what that means is when you have rain, it fills the dam faster. So you have to either release or you have catastrophic flooding. So these are the structural issues we need to look at in Nigeria. And until we do that, we're going to have flooding.
So infrastructural deficiency in that respect is actually a challenge here to the
and
country.
you remember last week when we started the first in the series of flooding, Professor Adanu did talk about that,
yes.
the dam that was supposed to be built in Adamawa many years ago.
And he mentioned that John just
yes.
mentioned that dam now. So that means that that dam is important because Adamawa is along the route of Lado Dam's water if it's released.
So the question is, why the delay?
That's a topic for another day, Joe. But for now, interagency collaboration is very key to a collective effort towards mitigating or even carrying out a rescue mission during emergencies of this nature. And I'd like to ask the NEMA DG to tell us what kind of collaboration has been existing between your agency, other agencies, and state governments to effect a good rescue operation.
Well, I think in that NEMA has been apt to that responsibility. In fact, the act that established NEMA, the mandate is coordinating federal responses within disaster management cycle of preparedness, mitigation, response, and recovery. And that we have been doing. In fact, on the 6th, after the update in the predictions, we call all stakeholders, including United Nations bodies, before that decision of the pronouncement of red alert was done. So I think it's apt. But I want to just comment on the issue of this issue of media campaign. You will be surprised after the pronouncement of the red alert, after the second meeting of all the stakeholders, we made a press conference. In the presidency, I was approached. Look at CNN. Every hour, they alert the nation, they tell the people what is happening. What is happening? Are you not telling the press? I know, because in a day, there was a day, consecutively 2 or 3 days, I went to media houses 3 times. But after that program, you never hear it or see it elsewhere. I think the media has a role to really contribute in enlightening people in all whatever activities we are doing. Not a single newspaper, even after the announcement of activation of the National Contingency Plan has carried it boldly in the front page. These are things that the media has to take initiative to assist the nation, to assist Nigeria in really enlightening people. That is what I will have to say.
Just
we already contributing.
It should not be stopped here. It should be hourly basis. There is a national disaster declared in so that every moment there has to be constantly and continuously telling people of it. Anyway, it's just trying to try to enlighten ourselves also and doing it in a better way. So these are some of my comments as regards to the media aspect.
What is currently happening in those states that you have declared a national emergency on, the 4 states? What is happening there at this moment? We also heard that you alerted the rescue mission of the Nigerian military and so on. So what is their own contribution?
Well, what it means is immediately after declaration by law, the DG NEMA has the delegated authority to invite any, or rather to use any authority or resources of the federal agencies to support the state. Already before now, all the ministries, all the agencies has been informed of this decision, and then, of course, will now act in that direction to ensure that federal supports really reach all the health, education, transport, all federal support that is available will be used in those states. This is what it means.
All right, thank you, DG. Let's quickly rejoin Victor Fodeke in Canada via Skype. I'm sure you've been listening to the conversation, and we have gotten to a point where we're talking about collaborative efforts, synergy between the federal and sub-nationals, because what we have on our hands right now is a crisis. Let's hear your views. How well are we managing that in terms of working together to solve this problem? Remember, it happened in 2012, and here it is again.
Yeah, thank you very much for getting back to me. The challenge is very high. The actions are at the grassroots, at the community. It is very critical that we train the community and build their capacity to respond. I'm talking with the DG of NEMA on the need to set up a disaster management agency, and that academy, disaster management academy, where these developed countries that they are success stories, they'll be able to train the trainers that will impact the states, local government, and the communities. In the synergy, you have national orientation agencies and various responsible agencies at the federal, at the public, and the private sector. And it is very critical that we recognize that all hands must be on deck so that people are trained on how to be able to adapt, be able to cope with the situation, to be able to be prepared, and to know what to do before disaster strikes, during disaster, and after disaster, at least 72 hours before federal help arrives, before state emergency management arrives, before the first responders even arrive there. These are the issues that I'm very happy we are talking about. And NTA is actually championing this in terms of information. We need the collaboration of the private sector because impact of climate change will impact the private sector too, because COP21, Paris Agreement, shows that the private sector needs to have a complete buy-in into making their facilities climate-proof, because some incidents of flood like this can render their supply chain that it might even cripple industries. So that is why all hands must be on deck with NEMA, with all the responsible response agency. It is a task that all hands must be on deck for this critical role of ensuring that no life is lost. Because what we need to do is it is commendable what NEMA is doing, what NAMET is doing, but let us have a real focus and to reset, not to focus our effort, not on trying to respond to disaster, but actually preparing the communities to know what to do. Institutional awareness in having flood maps, in having information about their situation there so that they know what to do. Because Nigerians are very, very knowledgeable. When they are sensitized and you use the various means of social media, in fact, in America right now, they have a presidential alert system. You can have the governor's alert system, local government chairman alert system, community leader alert system, that will go beyond just the electronic and the rest, as Dr. Osonwa has said, to be able to use the community means of communication at the grassroots, the faith-based institution, the churches, and the mosque, because all hands must be on deck to make sure that no life is lost. Let's use this year to learn from our lessons. Are there lessons that we are learning this year that we must archive and go through them? Where did we go wrong? Where did we go wrong in 2012? And then we use that information system and we fill the gaps there so that next year, if 5 lives were lost this year, maybe it will be reduced to probably 1. That should be our goal. We need to have a reset. And I am re-emphasizing the fact of having this disaster management academy with NEMA that can not only serve Nigeria, but also serve the whole of West Africa. Because disaster is something that will continue to happen, because the birds learn that when men learn to shoot without missing, they also learn to fly without perching. We must be prepared. It's the right word of preparedness. Information is there. That is it, like Boy Scout, be prepared. We don't have to wait for disaster to tackle. Disaster does not respect religion. It does not respect tribe. It does not respect color. It does not respect boundaries. So we must all join together, all hands on deck to put value to human life, please, so that we don't continue the rhetorics of singing this over and over again. Let us not wait until disaster strikes. We have now to prepare the nation.
All right, Dr. Victor Fodeke, thank you indeed for your insightful propositions there. And we're going to take a short break. But when we come back, we're going to return to Kaduna once more, because we want to share with Dr. Yusuf Abdullahi Rigasa on this issue of synergy or collaboration, interagency collaboration. Let's get to know what they're doing in Kaduna that is working, because from what he posited, it does seem that the collaboration is working in Kaduna State. This is Good Morning Nigeria on the network service of the NTA. When we come back, we'll continue the conversation. Stay with us.
Fake news which is shared for malicious purposes is a danger to our peace and security in Nigeria. Misinformation as fake news is a serious threat to our hard-earned democracy and promotes hatred and misunderstanding between our communities. We are all responsible for stopping the spread of fake news in its tracks. So, always check the source and credibility of any news item. Say no to fake news. This message is brought to you by the Federal Ministry of Information.
If you hear a bomb explosion or gunshots of an active shooter, that might be a terror attack. At such times, always remember 3 action words: run, hide, report. Don't try to run towards the terror scene to save the situation, because there might be a second bomb blast or another attack. Run far away and take cover. Make sure you are safe first. Yes, it is in our nature to sympathize over the hurt, but remember, only trained personnel can help in such situations. When in a secured environment, promptly call relevant authorities and help will come. For anonymous reporting, call 09630-3250-5 or 0813-2222-106. If you see something, say something. Nigeria unite against terrorism. This message is brought to you by the Federal Ministry of Information and Culture.
Chief. Good morning, sir. You're here already?
No, now my spirit day, my body day for house. What kind of question is that? Were you not the one that fixed this meeting for 8 a.m.? You are now coming by 10 a.m. and start asking me job questions.
But Chief, now, I'm sorry. Don't you also go late for meetings sometimes? You know now, African time.
No more African time. And no more pancaking of face during office hours. At the end of the day, we will lose valuable time. We will not make progress. If we want to move this nation forward, we must treat business as business and respect time. Change begins with me.
Thank you, sir. I'm sorry. Can we go for the meeting now, Chief?
Better.
This message is brought to you by the National Orientation Agency in conjunction with the Federal Ministry of Information and Culture.
All right, thank you for staying with us up to this moment on the program. And it's about time now for us to look at what other Nigerians are saying about our topic this morning. We have some tweets here. And Joy, would like to start?
Yes, let's start with this one from Okwoche Jackson. Why can't we find a lasting solution to all this? What are our governors doing with ecological funds?
That's a very big question. That's a very big question there from Okwoche, because the ecological fund is actually designed for this kind of emergency. All right, let's move on. Mike Anyako, adequate information must be given to the communities that are likely to be affected badly by flood. For easy evacuation, camp centers must be in place for would-be evacuees. Food, clothes, and other essential materials must be produced or procured immediately.
Let's go to Dele Jack Solomon Medj. He tweets, Nigeria is recognized as being vulnerable to climate change, and factors like flooding, if left unchecked, will continue to cause adverse effects on livelihoods in Nigeria, such as on-crop production, livestock production, fisheries, forestry, and post-harvest activities, and life and prosperity.
And from Nasiru Idris, there should be construction of dam in Adamawa axis to divert flood from Cameroon, construction of canals in riverine towns to absorb storm water, construction of drainages in towns and cities to free storm water from flash flood, clearance of waterways from waste.
And the next one is from Omogbolahan. He tweets, on the issue of flooding, it's a perennial quagmire, which expectedly by now, all relevant agencies and governments should have a concrete plan to address clearly. But in Nigeria, we seem more proactive only when misfortunes occur. We are almost never preventive.
All right, David Mike Terongwa, there is need to conduct a quick vulnerability mapping of the country, relocate people from floodplains. The flood waters is a resource. Let's harness it and use it for agriculture. Proper planning is key here. Help our people adapt to the changing climate. It cannot be business as usual. I think it's making reference to those who refuse to be evacuated from their ancestral homes.
Yeah, but from what he's saying also, there's need for adequate planning, like we were discussing earlier, before you move people. The next one is from Mohammed Usman. He tweets, the government should stop paying lip service to curbing flood. Being proactive is far better than being reactive.
Then Aminu Haliru says, actually, both federal and state government agencies have been responsibilities of providing shelters or temporary basic needs for the victims of flooding. But the victims themselves should listen to authorities to vacate to safer areas.
That's right. The next one is from Sani Michael Omakoji. He tweets, though flooding is largely due to climate change, human activities such as blocking water channels, building along flood-prone areas also aggravate the situation. In Nigeria, the effect of flooding can be reduced if we do holistic dredging of River Niger. But is there political will? Of course, there is political will, considering what we've seen in the
So
last
far, yeah.
1 or 2 weeks.
Yes. Mr. Brighton Amazo, the Benin City flood has kept most people away from their homes, shops and offices as routes are blocked anytime it rains. This is seriously affecting business activities around the city.
And we have this one from DW Nigeria Limited. Addressing climate change goes beyond tree planting as is being done in Nigeria. Other mitigating measures abound that government must also venture into.
All right, let's go back to Kaduna, where we have Dr. Yusuf Abdullahi Rigaza. Tell us more about awareness creation, interagency collaboration. How is it working in Kaduna State?
Yeah, the way it is working is just that we have to take cognizance of our reality. We believe that we have to build, community resilience. But then in cases like this, sometimes you have MDAs working.
But we could hear him. All right. Let's return to Abuja. Perhaps we're having issues with the audio line to Kaduna there.
Kirian, I want to go to Dr. John. So I have a question for him. That's coming from the perspective we got from Victor Fodeke, Dr. Victor Fodeke in Canada. He laid so much emphasis on the role of the private sector in solving this problem. And he did mention how they laid emphasis on it during COP21. We want to hear from you. How vital is the role of the private sector? And considering the crisis we're facing now, are they really contributing in Nigeria? Are they talking about corporate social responsibility in helping the situation we have at hand?
I don't think the private sector is doing enough, and I think that's primarily because they don't quite know what role they will play. Flood prevention, unfortunately, does not yield a significant return on investment for anyone. It's largely a governmental function. There are other areas of climate change mitigation where private sector can play a role. Waste to energy conversion is a wonderful area. Recycling is a wonderful area. Creating renewable energy from other sources can also generate income. So the area of flood prevention and flood mitigation is not very juicy for the private sector. So it would have to be a corporate social responsibility involvement, which often is lacking. Even when you hear of corporate social responsibility in Nigeria, it's really a quid pro quo situation where they are hoping to get larger contracts from government.
And that is, and that for me is sad, because it should be about contributing to the economy where you're making money from.
Yeah, but let me also point something out, which is very critical. The experience we had in 2012, one would have expected to see some preventive infrastructural measures. And let me be very specific. Some of these areas that are being flooded, we know they're going to be flooded. If you go to the Kogi axis, you go to Benue, you go to some of these places, you will see the watermark on buildings, water stain, where the flood had been, very high sometimes. It stains the building in some cases. Even when they repaint some people, you will still see the flood mark. Then you go to areas like Ibadan, Oyo, that has always been historically flooded. So people know where the floods happen. So then it begs the question, what are we doing in terms of infrastructure to prevent those floods from recurring? Most of our efforts, and I know they are doing a good job, seems to veer towards relief and emergency response. I want us to get into structures that will actually mitigate or stop flooding. How do you do that? First thing is, we have flood maps in Nigeria. They may be archaic now because they're over 20, 30 years old, but they are still very reliable flood. You look at the flood map, look at the flood plains, you evacuate people and allocate land to them and help them to re-establish themselves. So a lot of those shanties and shacks along the river banks are not safe. They shouldn't be there. People should be evacuated. That's one. Two, we need to build levees and barriers and walls along the river banks. If you do, that's what we do in the U.S. Some of those cities only exist because they are levees. I remember growing up in Massachusetts, Boston. we had levees. Those levees were so thick you could drive a car on top of the levee, made up of stones and gravel. So when the ocean surge comes, nobody is affected. Then we even have technology now. Those walls, you can embed sensors in those walls. When the water reaches a certain level and begins to touch the sensors, an alarm would go off. Even if it's the middle of night, people would run to higher ground because you know that the flood is about to come. Then you have issues of, we can declare some of those days in Nigeria drainage cleaning days. And this is where the states need to get involved. We've been clamoring about restructuring, and most times when we talk about restructuring, we're talking about resource allocation, so states can keep more. But this is an area where the states need to play a bigger role because they are the primary safeguarders of life and property. States need to step up and do the needful. Every state is slightly different in what they should do. Build structures, build resilience, so that the federal might will only supplement what they are doing, instead of relying on the federal as their primary focus of intervention.
You know, in the course of one of my questions initially, I mentioned the issue of sandbags. They are even the cheapest that one could do, especially in those areas that have been known to be prone to flood. And when you know it repeats itself and nothing is done, it does as if it seems as if we're not being very sensitive to flooding. Now let's come back to the Director General of the Hydrological Services. You know, you've had Dr. Osonwa speak there with respect to having also those infrastructure that could alert the public, you know. And I also wanted to speak to the issue of interagency collaboration, because you need to collaborate with other agencies to make your work effective. Yeah,
the Nigerian Hydrological Services Agency is doing its best in collaborating with other agencies, especially in giving them first-hand information about the forecast. Dr. John talked about flood mappings. The Nigerian Hydrological Services produce these mappings every year, and we send them to states. But, you know, taking them to state is one thing, and giving them attention is another. So we even produce them in colors, identifying especially those states where they have these kind of problems. So collaborating also, we give information day by day to all the relevant agencies, especially at the water level. The best collaboration I can talk about is now between the Cameroonian government and Nigeria. Yesterday, before we left for Lokoja, we got in touch with the Cameroonian authorities, those people who are in charge of the Lagbo Dam. And the good news for Nigerian is, according to him, he said their rainfall is decreasing. So the water level has dropped with 2 meters. So as at Saturday and Sunday, it was 21.4. Yesterday, before we left for Lokoja, it was 21.2 meters. So that's a very good news. At least the nightmare of Lagbo Dam will be often. So probably the water rainfall has coming down. So it's a good news for Nigeria.
All right, we'll keep praying that it will keep going down, and we hope that that will happen. Let's go quickly to our Kaduna Network Center and rejoin Dr. Yusuf Abdullahi Rigasa. This is an ongoing conversation, but briefly before we round up this conversation today, we want to hear from you. We've heard from all our resource persons here that apart from preventive measures, there is need for adequate preparation. This is something you're aware of. What do you do before you get to the prevention stage? What is working for you in Kaduna? What are you doing differently?
I think probably what we are doing differently is that we took the projections of NIMET and NISA very, very seriously. And the committee that is responsible for emergency flood response has been very active. And we have gone to communities to sensitize them of the need to build community resilience. We've been working with Christian Aid particularly. I think it's important to mention this. And they are working with the state government to build resilience in 9 communities across 3 local governments. Now, among these 3 communities, one community particularly took the issue of this community resilience very seriously, and before the flash flood of August, most of them were able to, move all their possession to an IDP camp earmarked for them. But those communities that refused to heed the warnings and maybe they refused to build this kind of community resilience, they suffered heavy losses. So we have seen that where communities come together to help each other and take government seriously, they are always able to adjust and adapt better to such kind of emergency. And the float emergency response platform, as I mentioned earlier, consists of about 10 agencies. We have, say, SEMA carrying out assessment and surveillance. We have Kaduna State Transport Authority providing the logistics so that we can be able to transport and rescue communities to appropriate IDPs camp. And the camp has to be secured. We have Operation Yagi providing security. We have KEPA. KEPA is responsible for ensuring that the IDPs are clean at all times. We have RWASA providing toilets. We have the Kaduna State Water Corporation providing water. So it's efforts distributed across agencies. We've not been able to test this over time. So right now what we are planning this week is to conduct a proper drill with all the 8 identified public spaces that are supposed to serve as IDPs. We'll sensitize all the communities, and then during the drill we will test our capacity to respond to various variables. There has to be a command center also that will be able to coordinate, the situation in these 8 identified IDPs. So basically, these are the things that we are doing to build community resilience and ensure that there is a proper synergy between citizens, communities, and the state government agencies. We're also
all right, at this point, we have to pause you to enable us accommodate other segments of our program because we are just rounding off this conversation. We'd like to thank you immensely, Kaduna State Environmental Protection Authority General Manager Dr. Yusuf Abdullahi Rigasa. Thank you very much indeed. And back here in the studio, we would like to appreciate Mustafa Mehaja, Director General, National Emergency Management Agency. So we thank you. Because, of course, you are going to be on the run this time around. I mean, we invite you tomorrow because, yes. And right here, Dr. John Osongwa, a climate change expert, and who, of course, brought in other perspective from other climes with respect to how climate change is handled. Thank you very much indeed for coming.
It's a pleasure. And,
of course, we had Dr. Victor Fodeke from Canada via Skype. We thank him. We're sure he's gone. We will thank him for his insights. Also, we have to appreciate our man here, the Director General of the Nigerian Hydrological Services Agency, Ahmed Madbudi Bashar. Thank you indeed for coming.
Thank you very much.
All right. Sports is next.
The group stages of the UEFA Champions League is set